And we are live. Welcome to those who are just joining in. My name is Anthony Tsavelos, and this is episode 3 of Bowtie Certified. And today's guest is Jenn Bergstrom. Jenn has 15 years experience in the tech industry, and she started off as a software engineer and her undergrad in electrical engineering. And she worked her way up, and then she decided to have a family and took 7 years off, and then came back into the industry. So when I first met Jenn in Tech Study Slack, which is the Slack community I hang out in, Jenn was giving me a lowdown of how she got in the industry, and she was really passionate about cloud and tech, and specifically chaos engineering, which is really cool. And so I wanted to bring Jenn on and give everyone an idea of what it's like to leave the industry and to come back stronger than ever, a mom, an intelligent woman who's made it. So welcome, Jenn.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. It's an honor to be a part of your webcast.
Thank you. So, Jenn, let's just dive right in. What were you doing before diving into the tech industry, and what made you decide this was your path?
Those are good questions. So honestly, when I was first picking a degree to go into as an undergrad, I was torn between commercial art and engineering. And it was a very tough choice. I was looking at schools for both, and ultimately ended up going with engineering for one primary reason, and that was I got better scholarships in it.
Nice.
So getting through college affordably is really, really valuable. So
yes,
that took priority. The other piece that I liked about it was with engineering in particular, you can dive right in out of undergrad and actually start producing and doing real work. With commercial art, you tend to have to go into kind of an apprenticeship or journeyman type of role for oftentimes a decade before you even really get to start doing anything. And that would have driven me batty. And the more that I looked at that, the more I realized that wasn't going to be a good choice for me anyway. But I went into EE expecting fully to go into hardware and thinking that that's my path and that's what I was going to do. And then I did a senior design project that was entirely hardware and despised every minute of it.
Oh,
and that taught me very quickly that I didn't want to do that. However, my coding classes were some of my favorite classes in the undergrad program. So I made a switch and decided, okay, I'm going to go and be a software engineer.
Nice.
And all of the interviews that I did going out of undergrad were in software engineering. And, I had probably 15 interviews before I landed a job that I was happy to accept.
Oh, wow.
And it forced me to move from where I had grown up into Colorado, whole different state, whole different area. Didn't know anybody out here other than my husband, who obviously moved with me. But once I got out here, I didn't look back. And I've loved every minute of software engineering since then. It's been a blast. The interesting part with my career path, I think, is the break that I took in the middle, because we started out as software engineers. I was working for a big company. I was really enjoying it. But then we decided we wanted to build our family. And once we had a couple of kids, it was important for both of us that one of us stay home with them full time and help raise them in those early years when kids need
when they need you.
Care.
Yeah.
So I stepped out of the industry entirely and focused on being a full-time mom. And like you mentioned, I was there for 7 years, working with the kids, having a lot of fun. I loved that. That was an absolute blessing to be able to be a part of that and to focus on them for that time. But by the time my youngest was ready to go into school full-time, I was ready to go back to work. And it was really, really nice to be able to come back into the industry at that point.
So what was your strategy to break back into the industry?
Well, I had a few big obstacles. The technology industry, and specifically software engineering, technology changes very, very quickly. And the skills that I had before I left the industry to be with my kids were very rusty at that point. I hadn't used them in 7 years, pretty much at all. I'd kept up with the industry, at least to a degree. I read industry magazines. I, went online and looked at things there. I did a little bit of free training online, but my skills were rusty. So my strategy was multi-part. I focused on freshening up my capabilities with the skills that I knew I was good at and making sure I could still do those. And that was coding in C++ and Java primarily at that point in time. So I took a couple of courses online and refreshed my skills on those and built a few small projects so that I knew that I could actually successfully still write code. And then the other piece that I did was start getting active in online communities, primarily LinkedIn at the time. Just reaching out to people from my previous network, getting to know people again, saying, hey, I'm back out here. I'm interested. I'm looking for opportunities. And I started taking interviews. I put my resume out with a couple of different recruiting companies, and so that I could get a wider distribution because I hadn't been in the industry for a while. And ultimately, the job that I ended up taking after, again, probably close to 15 interviews, was one that a coworker that I had worked with briefly before stepping out of the industry remembered me in and recommended me for.
That's awesome. A good note there for people who are watching is that everyone you come across, you may need their assistance down the road. So like I tell my son every morning, always be kind.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Kindness is key.
Yes.
Don't burn bridges. That's another way that we say it. I've seen a few of my former coworkers spectacularly flame out when they left and then try to come back into the industry later and have a really hard time of it.
And so what were, I know that you had some difficulties getting back into the industry. What were some of the difficulties that you ran into other than, you had to upgrade your skills?
Well, that was probably the single biggest one. The second biggest difficulty was credibility. How do you prove to people that your 7-year gap was purely by choice and that you are a capable engineer? And the way that I dealt with that one was building the small projects that I did. I've made a GitLab or a GitHub repo and put a few small projects out there that I coded in C++ and Java, and when they were asking me questions about my software writing capabilities, I'd point them to those repos and say, well, go take a look. This is what I was doing. This is what I designed. It took me this long. And that helped a lot. And I did, like I said, I did probably 15 interviews and 10 of them were not good. 10 of them were rough. And I was basically told, you're too rusty. We can't take a risk on you. And the job that I ultimately ended up taking, which is with the company that I'm still with, was an instance where I interviewed with who was then the president of the company, which was a fortuitous circumstance. That was pure luck. Oddly enough, my family was living in Washington, D.C. for just that summer, and he was out there for a business trip when my resume came across his desk. And so he made time to have dinner with me briefly so that we could have a casual interview, and that's where we interviewed for a job back in my hometown of Denver, while we were both out in Washington, D.C. It was
wow, that's crazy,
right? You would never expect that to happen. It was serendipitous, but it was great, and he took a chance on me. I think he could see that I was interested in learning and that I was willing to work on upping my skills and to continue to develop myself. And he trusted that I would do that and that it would work out. And I'm still with the company 6 years later, so it seems to be working out.
And this is the current company where you're at now?
It is. When I hired on with them, they were actually a much smaller company. Mm-hmm. And that smaller company, I was employee number 74, I believe. And then that smaller company merged with another company that was a little bit bigger, but still kind of a small company. Mm-hmm. And then that company got purchased by my current company.
Wow, that's amazing.
Right. That's been an interesting journey.
So how did so you hold a few certifications from what I understand?
Yeah, just a few.
You mind telling us?
So I currently have 9 active AWS certifications and 2 Azure certifications, and then the Security Plus CompTIA certification.
Wow, that's incredible, Jen. Incredible. For those of you watching, I mean, to gain this amount of certifications is like, it's at a legendary level, I have to say. I mean, I hold 10 cloud certifications myself, and they were difficult to get them all. And so anyone who has like more than 3 or 4 of them is just like, oh my God, like you literally spend so much time. You give up your weekends, you give up family time. But how have these certifications helped you in your current career and in your previous?
So they've opened a lot of doors for me. The knowledge that I built by getting the certifications, and I went about getting the certifications for the sake of the knowledge, not for the sake of the certification. I want to make that clear, because there is a difference, right? You have people that go out and get a bunch of certifications and do it solely for the name and for the
glory.
recognition that way. What's that?
For the glory.
Exactly, for the glory. They want that recognition, but they can't really use the technology that they're certified in. And I didn't want to be that type of person. So, but the opportunities that they've unveiled for me or made available to me have been tremendous within my own company. I went from being a software engineer, I was hired in as a C++ and Java engineer, those capabilities that I already had, to now being the lead of the cloud services team here in our company. I have, 14 direct reports under me, and that's expanding over time as we need more. And we're recognized as the subject matter experts in our company, which, by the way, has about 15,000 employees worldwide now.
Wow.
My team is recognized as subject matter experts and are sought out by different parts of the company all around the world to help them as they migrate into the cloud and improve their technologies.
That's crazy. That's insane. Oh my God. It's like blowing my mind right now.
It is pretty crazy. I never would have thought my career would go the way it went when I first started down the certification path.
Interesting. So, so I guess you can say certifications have helped you, not just for the glory piece, but for the actual learnings behind it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. My goal initially when I started getting the certifications was to really build my knowledge and become expert in AWS. That was the primary cloud that our company was using. And I wanted to get out in front of that. I wanted to be one of the leaders in that rather than just one of the folks that did the implementation. And diving in and studying for the certifications, and I started with the core 5 in AWS, the 3 associates and the 2 professionals,
yes,
which is, I think, a fairly standard path as far as getting the certifications goes.
Usually,
yeah. If you're going to get more than 1 or 2 anyway.
Yeah, well, not anymore. I mean, because they've removed all the restrictions, you can now just go from, 1 associate straight to a pro.
True, you can. I would not recommend people do that very often. It leaves your knowledge really lopsided.
Yes, agreed.
That's not, if you want to work in the industry, you want to be well-rounded and have depth across the board as much as possible.
Agreed. So, besides certifications, what other learnings assisted you to be better at your job?
So oddly enough, one of the ones that I think has been tremendously valuable for me is just the desire that I have to dive in and read. Reading a ton of different materials, a ton of different topics and subjects and types of books has been absolutely essential, because as I've progressed in my career, communication has become more and more important. And understanding how language works and how the words flow in both written text and in verbalization that's in those texts is critical. It's been an absolutely essential skill that they've helped me build.
So I guess you would say that it's not just about documentation.
Right.
Because I mean, as tech people, we all have to go through documentation one time or another. But when I found for myself, what you're saying, it resonates a lot with me, because I do tend to go outside of my comfort zone and start learning, a little bit about psychology, a little bit about sciences, business, entrepreneurship, and it made me a more well-rounded person. And I think that what you're saying is like right on the money, where people should step out of their comfort zone and start reading books. There's times where I don't even have the time to read, so I'll do Audible. Right? I'll go for a run and just put in my earbuds and listen to it.
Yeah, I've tried to do that. Audible doesn't really work for me. That's not the way that I tend to learn. I have to see the words, but I know a lot of my coworkers have used the online books and the Audibles pretty effectively for themselves.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So stepping back, I wanted to ask you your very first tech job. What was it? How was it like? And how did you fall into it?
So my very first tech job was an internship, thankfully a paid one, for a very small company in Utah where I was going to school. And it was writing C code to imitate an ASIC that they were designing, which is a software chip that did high-speed image analysis, basically.
Wow.
And so I was responsible for one little module in that whole software simulation that they were creating of their ASIC chip. And that was, I landed it, or I ended up there because I was realizing as I was getting ready to start interviewing for positions that if I wanted to get into software engineering, and this was my senior year in college, that I needed some experience. I needed to actually have some hands-on and have something to show when I went out and started interviewing as I was graduating. And this little company that I went with happened to be looking for interns at the time. And I applied for the job, and they almost didn't hire me because I was a double E major, not a software engineer. And I convinced them to. And the way that I convinced them to was the same thing that's run through pretty much my entire life, which is I'm eager to learn. Throw me at something, give me the opportunity, let me have somebody I can talk to ask questions, and I'll make it work and I'll make it good for you. And thankfully they believed me. They were convinced, and they gave me a job and let me try it. And it was a huge learning experience. That was my first experience of writing software at more of an enterprise scope, where you had to interact with other subsystems. You had to interact with other engineers to do the work. You had to make sure your APIs were organized properly and implemented the way that you said you would. And you had to make sure that was my first real exposure to configuration management and making sure that you didn't check in things that were broken, because I did break the system a couple of times early on there by checking in code that didn't work yet. And the screaming that ensued from that taught me very quickly that's a really bad idea. So I've never forgotten that.
Learn, right? That's how we learn.
It is how we learn. Failing forward is effective both in life and in software development.
Yes. That's awesome. So I'm sure if there is any women out there that are watching, we talked a little bit about this offline, Jen, being a mom and being in the tech industry. Tell us more about that, because the passion that came from you. I'd love for my audience to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, it definitely is a passion area of mine. I firmly believe that the tech industry should be wide open to women, and there's no reason we can't be excellent in technology and excellent in this industry. I think a lot of women are discouraged from going into it at a very young age. I look at when I volunteer with my kids in my kids' classrooms, even as early as second or third grade, girls were starting to peer pressure themselves out of being interested in math and science. They were starting to get turned away from it a little bit by, hearing the boys say, hey, this is a boys thing, and it's not. There's no reason that it should be. And that was one of the main reasons why I volunteered in my kids' classrooms, was to show them, hey, I'm a woman, I'm in the tech industry, and this is fun. This stuff is fun. There's no reason you can't dive in and be amazing at it. play with math, play with science, experiment, mess around with it, learn, fail, try different things. But don't give up, and don't let people tell you can't, because there's no reason you can't. There is every reason you can.
Awesome. Awesome. Is there any advice that you can give to women who are starting out in the tech industry?
Sure. One of the biggest things that served me well in my career is finding one or two other women that are in the tech industry and asking them to be a mentor. I've had a series of absolutely amazing women that have mentored me through the years in my career. And the mentorship doesn't have to be anything formal. It doesn't have to be within your own company. As a matter of fact, sometimes it's better when it's not, because then your feedback and your input that you get from them is from a very different perspective than maybe what you see within your own company. The other advice I would give is get plugged in. There's a lot of really good organizations out there that are focused on helping women get into the tech industry and helping you really do a good job. One of my favorites right now is one called Women Who Code, which is a worldwide organization that's out there working to encourage women to dive in. And they have some great social communities out there. They're active on LinkedIn. They're active on Twitter. They have multiple Slack channels that you can go and join. And they're very accepting and very encouraging, and are absolutely willing at any time to answer any questions or to help you or to meet up with you and give you guidance and suggestions and things that you can do.
That's amazing. Yeah, there is so many I guess people out there that want to promote this, because there's a lot of smart women out there who I personally think would be amazing in tech, and a lot of them shy away from it because of this stigma that the industry brings, and it really sucks. It does.
It does.
I just call it what it is. It just sucks.
One of the most frustrating things I've heard women say when they find out I'm a software engineer is, "Wow, that's amazing. You must be really smart. I've heard that's really hard." And I always kind of stop short when I hear that and say, it's not any harder than any other career path. It's a specialized set of knowledge. If you work to build that set of knowledge and work to learn it and understand it, you're going to do fine. You're going to be great. But there's definitely a stumbling block there that a lot of people have internalized and believe that tech is hard and that it's something that women aren't good at. My perspective is that we do bring a special perspective and a different way of looking at things than most of the men that go into tech.
Absolutely.
And this industry needs us. It needs our voices in there. It needs our perspective. It needs the way that we look at things, because one of the biggest compliments that my boss told me a couple of weeks ago was that I'm a change driver in the company. That was a huge compliment. And I will probably never forget that he called me that, because that's what we need. We need more women getting in here and being change drivers. And it's not necessarily change even culturally so much as it is changing the way that we look at things, giving us a more holistic view of the systems that we're developing and the software that we're building and the people that it's serving and that it's meant to help. You need as many different diverse perspectives as you can get, and women are half of the country. We should be half of the industry.
I totally agree with everything that you said. It truly needs to change, and it is changing slowly, but it still needs quite a bit of push. Just wanted to put this out there. Anyone in the audience who has a question, feel free to put it in the comments, and I will get it answered. So Jenn, what does the future look like for you?
The future for me, it's an interesting question. I've mentioned a couple of times that my career path didn't go the way that I expected it to go.
Right.
It's taken a lot of twists and turns and changed up in many ways that I didn't expect it to, but I've been loving the way that it's been changing. The future that I see for myself is to continue being a change driver. I am working hard within my company to drive in a continual development, continual learning expectation for all of our engineers, and to help build that culture out from the top down and from the bottom up. It's a different way of looking at things. It's a slightly different way of approaching the way that we develop our engineering talent within the company than what a lot of companies traditionally have done, but it's also tremendously effective. So I see myself playing a larger role in driving that kind of change, hopefully within my current company, because I love them, they're awesome, and I want to stay with them. But also in the broader industry, I'd like to see that be more of an expectation than something where people are surprised that you're learning on your own and that you're building additional perspectives and additional knowledge. So as far as the technical side of things goes, I don't even want to predict, because what I'm doing now, I didn't know how to do it all 5 years ago.
But I mean, where do you see it going? Where do you see the tech industry going?
So it's an interesting thing. A few years ago, cloud was the big thing, and everybody was moving to the cloud, and it was very exciting. And we are doing that. And my company specifically has a huge push right now to move a lot of our resources off of on-prem systems into cloud systems. But what I've noticed is there's a lot of talk now and a lot of concern with vendor lock-in and with being tied to specific cloud providers, and that type of thing, which essentially is the same problem as procuring a whole bunch of hardware for your on-premise data center and then having to stay with that for 15 years because the cost of moving is too big, right? People are seeing that same kind of problem with cloud industry now. So now there's a lot more push toward things like Kubernetes and containerization of systems to make your systems truly agnostic. We've heard that phrase, right? Platform agnostic, that's been thrown around in the industry for a long time. But with Kubernetes and with containers, that's actually a real possibility now, that we can create systems that can be cloud agnostic and that can be deployed anywhere you have enough resource to deploy them. So I think that that's a big place that the industry is going to go to. I think you're going to see a lot more Internet of Things where you have deployments of your software systems in a tremendously diversified, distributed environment. So, conceptualize the idea of everybody's cell phone being one small piece in a huge network that does amazing processing. I think that type of thing is going to grow a lot more, and we're going to see that a lot more in the industry too.
Computer in your pocket.
I mean, we all already have it, right? So
it's true. I'm waiting for the day where you could just take your phone and just dock it, and then bam, there's your computer.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for the day. I mean, I think Intel had released something like that a while back. I'm not sure. Anyways, Rob Stewart has a question. And he says, as somebody who has invested a lot of time in learning AWS and Azure, what is your perspective on these two competing cloud platforms?
Well, I'm going to freely admit that I'm very biased here. There's a reason I have 9 AWS certifications and only 2 Azure. Honestly, there are a few things that Azure does very well. But for the bulk of things, I think AWS is several to many years ahead of Azure and their capabilities. I'm trying not to be too insulting toward Azure, honestly. That's one of the technologies.
Maybe Microsoft needs to hear this, and this way they can, better develop their platform.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, Azure is one of the few technologies that when I've dove in and really worked to learn it, I've liked it less and less as I've learned more and more about it.
Hi.
I don't say that about anything else but Azure. Honestly, they do have some strong suits. Azure is really, really good at multi-cloud, or not multi-cloud so much, but at hybrid architectures. So they do a really good job of allowing you to monitor both an on-prem and an in-Azure environment successfully with a single pane of glass kind of monitoring system.
Right.
They do that better than anybody I've seen as far as the cloud providers. They also are really good with the Active Directory, that integration and single sign-on and that type of securing of your system is really good with Azure. They make that pretty easy to do and pretty easy to set up.
They've always been solid Active Directory, though. Always.
Yeah. So they have some strong suits, and they are playing catch up. They're getting better. When they initially started putting their regions out, they had 1 data center per region, and that's not a very resilient way to build out your infrastructure. And they've realized that. And so now they're putting availability zones out in their regions, which is a huge improvement and a big step forward in their platform maturity. So they are making good changes. But AWS is the granddaddy of all the cloud environments. I mean, they were the first to the table, and their pace of innovation and the pace of change is insane. They're constantly adding new services, constantly adding new capability, constantly improving the capability they've already got. So it's a huge mountain that Azure is going to have to get over in order to really be able to compete with AWS.
So for those people who are looking for cloud jobs, what would you recommend to them?
So my recommendation is not to focus so much on finding a cloud job as it is on finding a company or an environment that you want to work in. So do your research beforehand and look and say, okay, I want to work with a company that uses AWS. Great, let's go find what companies use AWS. And then look at those companies and look at which ones have a culture you like. Look at which ones have opportunities that you like and that are located where you want to be located. Although that one matters a little bit less now in the COVID environment than it used to.
Yeah. Era of COVID.
Exactly. Remote is much more a thing now than it ever used to be, which is, I think, all to the good.
Agreed.
But look for those opportunities, find the companies that you think you want to work for, and then see what technologies they're using and dive into those technologies and make sure that you enjoy working with them. Because no matter how much you think you want to work for a specific company, if you don't like the technology stack they're using, you're not going to be happy in that job. So, do your research, look into it ahead of time, find what you want to do, find what thrills you, find what makes your eyes light up, and dive into that and look for opportunities in that area.
Yeah, I mean, when I first started out in cloud, because I went from a sysadmin background, I was a Windows sysadmin. Yes, I was a Windows sysadmin. I got laid off, and I was like, what am I going to do with my life? And so I decided that I wanted to move into the cloud environment because that's where things were happening, right? AWS was moving and grooving back then. They literally owned the market. And so that's when I was like, okay, I'm just going to go all in on AWS because of the amount of market share they have, which means that it would be more strategic for me to do that because I'll find a job easier that way. So, yeah, so that's where I was going with that question of, what cloud would you recommend people to go to? I mean, yeah, the technology stack matters, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of like, you drive a car, but you have to know all the features to know whether or not it's right for you, right?
This is true.
For me, being in Canada, if it doesn't have heated seats, I don't want the car. Just saying.
That's not an option. That's a necessity.
Well, here they consider it an option. So,
well, they consider it one here too, but in Colorado, it's more of a necessity than an option.
Yeah,
you need that in the winter.
So, out of all the advice that you've already given, what is the one main piece of advice that you can give to others who are striving to get either into technology or they're trying to land a better role in the industry? What would that be?
So there was advice that I got from my manager years ago, and it was dress for the job that you want. And by dress, I don't mean the clothes that you're wearing. I mean the skills that you build, the technology that you work with, the personality that you present, and the work that you create. Look for the characteristics and build the characteristics in yourself that you would want to work with in an employer and in other individuals within a company. If you want to be in the tech industry, great. Build out your tech skills, study as much as you can, show that desire, get hands-on, build things. AWS is fantastic for that because it's really easy to get in there and play without spending any money. You can do a lot. I have a static website that I've hosted out of my own private AWS account for a couple of years now, and it doesn't cost me anything, right? And that's
awesome.
Well, okay, I shouldn't say that. It cost me 50 cents for the domain because I use a Route 53 domain. So I pay 50 cents for that. But that's it. That's not a barrier of entry anymore like it used to be. So dress for the job that you want, build yourself into the kind of engineer you would want to work with, and advertise that and be open and honest about what you're looking for, what capabilities you have, what capabilities you're interested in developing when you do interviews. I don't know. That's about about all I can say for it, I guess.
No, I mean that's great advice, sound advice. You know, you have to go for the job that you want, and really just go for it. Don't let anything stop you.
Yeah.
Rob Stewart has another question. For those of you who are not connected with Rob on LinkedIn, go and reach out to this guy. This guy's a dynamo. I had him last week on as a guest. Amazing guy.
I second that.
Amazing. So Rob asks, what are some things you look for when you interview candidates for roles you're trying to fill?
That's a very good question. My answer is the tech skills honestly matter a little bit less than a lot of the other skills. You have to have the right soft skills. You have to be good at communicating. You have to be interested in communicating with the team, especially in a more remote environment like we're currently operating with. You have to be very good at reaching out and asking questions and talking to others and, you know, having that skill set. The other thing that I look for is a desire to learn, an eagerness to learn, and a fire in their eyes when they're talking about the technology and the things that they've been doing. One of the questions that I always ask people in my interviews is, what is the latest thing that you learned and why? And I explicitly caveat it saying it doesn't have to be a technical thing that you learned. If you've been learning guitar on the side, great, tell me about it. Tell me why you're learning that. There's value in that. But what I'm really trying to get at when I ask that question is I want to see engineers that have a desire to learn, because the only thing that's really steady in this industry is the fact that it's constantly changing. My skill set now that I'm using on a day-to-day basis is very different from what my skill set was 5 years ago. And I expect 5 years from now, it'll be very different again. And that's great. But in order to keep up in that industry and in order to be able to do the job, especially in my team, where we're seen as experts across the company in cloud solutions, you have to be constantly learning. You have to want to do that.
Yeah.
So for my team in particular, that's absolutely essential.
So learning mindset.
Absolutely.
So you touched on this a few times, and I kind of want to focus on this because I think that people in the tech industry really need to hear this. Soft skills. How do you get good at soft skills other than talking to people, like actually talking to people?
That's definitely a very good way. And I will admit, as an introvert, that's a challenge for me. I prefer not to more often than not. But I've learned to reach out and talk to people. A big part of the way that you learn that is, again, by diving in and doing, right? There's organizations like Toastmasters out there that you can sign up that give you the opportunity to speak and that give you the opportunity to interact with others in your industry and others to build that skill set. Look for opportunities to reach out and volunteer, volunteering in classrooms, volunteering, with industries or orgs that are completely separate from the tech industry. Anything that you're doing that way builds those skills because you're interacting with other people that are out there with a common interest. So that's a big one. And then on the writing side, don't shy away from writing. Take opportunities when you're writing documentation for code. Don't just write the minimum documentation. Try to write documentation that you'd actually want to read. Look at it that way. Look at it from that perspective and practice doing it that way. All of those are valuable ways to build capabilities in the soft skills side of thing. And then the other side is, and Anthony, you touched on this earlier, be kind, right? Look for ways that you can reach out to others and be kind. Absolutely. Building that kindness and looking at people from their perspective and trying to understand individuals from their perspective is a huge part of a good soft skill set. So work on doing that. Cultivate a mentality of assuming the best of people and making them prove you wrong, because more often than not, they'll rise to your expectations and you'll get what you want and what you hoped for out of them versus what you feared you might get.
Yeah. I mean, I've met a lot of Debbie Downers in the tech industry, and I'm just like, what is wrong with you? Like, why can't you just be nice? Just smile, You don't even have to say anything. I mean, smiling at somebody is just literally being nice. You don't even have to open your mouth. But yeah, saying something nice is, it can take some time for introverts to do something like that. So yeah. Seeing if we have any more questions in the comments. It looks like Rob's all out of questions. So Jenn, what is the best way for others to get in touch with you if they have any questions or if they are looking for a mentor? I don't know if you're mentoring any people, but
I am, and I'm certainly interested in acting as a mentor for individuals. That's always very welcome. Some of the best ways to reach me, I'm pretty active on Tech Study Slack, and Anthony put the link up on that earlier. So that's a good way to reach out if you want to chat with me. I am typically available there. My LinkedIn profile is also public. If you're interested in connecting on LinkedIn, I'm happy to connect there. I have connections across the world there, and I'm always happy to build that and happy to chat with people there. I'm also somewhat active on the Linux Academy Slack. So if you want to catch me there and you're already there, that you can reach out, and I'm happy to respond there as well. But really, the Tech Study Slack and LinkedIn are the two best sources to reach me through. And my profile picture is the same as the introductory photo that Anthony had of me. So you can just look for the Jennifer Bergstrom with that profile picture, and you found me.
There you go. There you go. Actually, Eddie from Kuwait had a question. And he says he wanted to ask you, while recruiting, are you selecting candidates based on their credentials or work experience?
Honestly, it's a little bit of both. I've hired people that have degrees and lots of years of experience, and I've also hired people that have no degrees but applicable experience, and for a few roles, people that don't even have degrees yet. As I mentioned before, one of the key things that I look for with my candidates that make them stand out to me is that desire to learn, the eagerness to learn, the eagerness for the technology. It's, training an engineer to do the work in the way that you want them to do the work is not that hard if they're eager to learn. And most of the time, credentials or work experience don't necessarily reflect that ability and eagerness to learn and that ability to work in the way that you need them to work. So, I honestly focus a lot more on that desire and that eagerness. Now, if they say on their resume that they have experience in a technology, I will poke at that a little bit. And if I find that they can't answer questions on it that they probably should be able to answer based on their experience level, that tends to
red flag.
Willing to hire them.
Are you lying to me?
I expect honesty. Yes. And I will poke at that, and that is a disqualifier if I see that somebody's not being honest. Absolutely. I'd much rather somebody say, I don't have experience there, but maybe that's something I'd be interested in learning, than having them say that, yeah, I'm an expert in that, and then not be able to answer questions about it.
Yeah. So Eddie, and for anyone else looking for a tech job, don't lie on your resume, please. If you say that you've done something, I mean, I look at experience as doing labs, being able to prove that you've done something, right? Mm-hmm. So I use personally labs that I've done in courses, like my man Adrian Cantrell. Shout out to him. Anyways, he recommends that we always go into a mindset of doing the labs because it solidifies what we've learned, solidifies the learnings. And ever since he taught me that, I've been not only teaching my students that, but I've been doing it myself. And I find that it changed my world, because back when I was in corporate and I was looking for jobs, it was easier for me to find a job saying that, hey, I haven't actually done this in production, but I have done this, and here's proof that I did it, and here's how I did it. And that speaks volumes with people. I mean, I don't know if it does for you, Jenn, but I know a lot of a lot of employers, they never shied away from that, because it shows that you're willing to learn, you're willing to get out of your comfort zone and learn something new, and just try it out.
Absolutely. Any proof that you can provide of real hands-on experience doing things, even if it's a series of failed experiments. Oh, I was trying to learn machine learning and I built out these 15 models and they didn't work, but this is why they didn't work, and this is what I learned from doing that. That means a lot more to me than 5 AWS certifications with no experience behind it. The hands-on experience, the actually doing things, is huge. And it doesn't have to be doing in a work environment. It can be doing on your own. EC2 instance in AWS is great. There's nothing wrong with that.
Is there anywhere that you would recommend for people to go to do labs like that?
Well, if they're willing and able to pay for it, you're going to get top-notch labs from Adrian's courses, absolutely, in AWS. There's also some free tutorials that AWS has out on their website that you can try, and I don't remember the precise link for it, but if you do, if you go to AWS and then do a search for tutorials, they'll pop up a whole bunch, and there's some that you can just follow along with in your own environment and try. That's a really good way to get to get hands-on things. I actually used that for the Alexa skill that I built for my kids as a random Christmas gift last year.
Awesome.
I built an Alexa skill for them, and then on Christmas Day, I took them over to Alexa and showed them how to use it.
That's amazing.
It was fun. It was just
My
fun.
mom built me an Alexa skill.
Exactly. It's just fun, right? Who gives that kind of a gift to their kids? I have a coworker and on my team that gave his kid an EC2 instance, a reserved EC2 instance, as a Christmas gift, which I thought was absolutely tremendous. That was an amazing gift.
Minecraft server, anyone?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so far the kid's done a web browser. They've done they did use it as a Minecraft server, oddly enough, for a little while, which was kind of funny. But then, yeah, they're just kind of playing with it and experimenting and getting hands-on, and he works with them and helps them come up with ideas that they want to play with using that instance. So, I mean, that's pretty cool.
That is, definitely. I have a question from Robert Lee. He says, I joined late, and that's okay, Robert. There's a replay on a bunch of different channels, so it's all good. Jenn, where do you see yourself in the next 5 years?
In the next 5 years. So I touched on this a little bit earlier in the conversation, and that's a really challenging question. As far as specific career opportunities or job responsibilities, I don't really know where I'm going to be in 5 years. I have a desire to be a change driver in the industry and in my company, and the way that I've been doing that is within my company is driving in a learning culture and encouraging that culture and having communications with people all the way up to the president of the company about how important that is and what the return on investment is for the company. So as far as my career within my company, I see myself being more of a voice and more of a leader in driving that culture into the company as a whole. That still lets me stay technical. I hope that I'm still, feet in the water at least, doing technical work. I don't want to step away from that. I've invested a lot of time in building those skills and capabilities, and I want to keep using them. But I also want to help and enable others within the company do that as well, and make us be really an employer of choice for engineers that are eager to learn and that want to dive in and try things out and do exciting work. As far as broader outside of that, I see myself being a voice in the community to help women get into the industry, to help other minorities get into the industry. Diversity is absolutely critical in the software technology industry, and we don't have enough of it yet. We need to be reaching out and encouraging people that aren't typically seen as being engineers or software engineers, and help them see where they can add value to this community, because everybody adds a lot of value to it. And the more voices we have and the more different backgrounds and opinions we get, the better we all are going to be. Absolutely.
I hope that answers your question, Robert. Robert also supplied Rob Stewart also supplied some self-paced labs that the audience can take from AWS. I believe they're all free. And if you open up a brand new account, you get some free credits, and voila, it doesn't cost you a penny. So
Exactly.
thank you, Rob. As well, you mentioned Adrian's courses. You can find them at learn.cantrell.io. And yeah, that's all I got. Jenn, this has been awesome. Any last words that you'd like to say to the audience, or something that we didn't touch on? Floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on today. I really appreciate this opportunity, and it's been a very fun conversation. I think the thing that I would say to people and exhort people to remember as they work through their careers in this industry is failure is just a step forward on your career path. It's not something to be ashamed of. It's not something to be mad at yourself over. It's something to learn from. And more often than not, I've failed when I first try things. And the process of going back and figuring out why I failed and what I did wrong and how I can not fail in the future has taught me so much more than anything ever would if I always had an easy path. So, please don't let yourself get discouraged by that, especially for the non-traditional folks that are looking to break into the industry. Use the failure as a stepping stone. Use it as a way to get stronger and to be better and to move forward in your path, because that's what it can ultimately be and what it should be.
I always say that failure is just learnings in disguise.
Exactly. I remember you made a post about that on LinkedIn, I think last week.
I did. Yes, I did. I come up with that same line, but I try to do it in different ways, because I want people to understand that we all fail, and it's a part of the learning process. I mean, the certifications that I got, I didn't just get them bang right off the bat. I mean, I failed so many times. So many times. But it's all good. I learned from it, and that was part of it. So for those of you who are looking to get certifications, don't let the failures deter you. Just keep on moving forward, and find some good support. Tech Study Slack.
Really good community, everybody.
I can't say enough good things about Tech Study Slack. It's such a great community. Everyone's so supportive. We're all learning at the same pace, and it's amazing. But anyways, I wanted to thank you so much, Jenn, for being on the show. It's been such a pleasure. I hope that you've inspired some people, hopefully many, to come into the tech industry, specifically those women who are looking to get into tech. If you're a woman out there and you're watching this, Jenn is looking for, she is mentoring, so feel free to reach out to her. Yeah, I just wanted to put that out there. So thank you again. Thank you everyone who tuned in, and join me next week in the next episode. And until then, keep striving and keep on learning.